I think you ought to know. About men's radio. The place where men and women really speak. Oh man, what a show. It's men's radio. This crazy show is on 3 times a week. Now Russ and Phil are there to help with all your cares. We laugh, we cry, we talk like grown-ups do. But if you're sad and low, it won't cost you no dough. And radio, that's the place for you. With Russ Kane and Phil Dave.
Couldn't help notice
already. It's Friday.
Are you in Croydon?
Yes, I am.
Ah, very sunny in Croydon, which is strange because it's not very sunny where I am. Go on, everybody. Oh. And when did Croydon have a beach and an ocean?
I know, it's shocking, isn't it? No, I am actually in Southend-on-Sea. But
oh, right. No. I thought you were. Yes. Go on. Yes. Yep. Kimmy Lashmore knows it's Croydon. Go on, tell everybody, show off. Go on, then we bring on our special guest. Off you go.
Well, I'm terribly sorry to do this to you, but I'm not sorry at all. I am actually in Tel Aviv in Israel at the moment.
Good Lord. Who'd have thought? I can't believe you go away for a 2-week holiday and you say, oh, I'll be on the show. And I'm going, Phil, relax. It's your holiday. But no.
Well, do you know what the truth of the matter is? It's because Chantal puts us all to shame.
Yeah, I know she does. She basically. I've never liked her. Judy Voice, formerly Susan, now of bloody Guildford. Hi, gang, out walking dog around the village, and on one side was was an ostrich. Judy, for God's sake, take what letters. Come on, you're being ridiculous now. The other side were peacocks.
An ostrich?
Elizabeth Green, apparently, had to get it straight in there from New York. Been there, worn the t-shirt. I bet you believe me have. What have we got here? I'm so thrilled you've joined us. What is it? I can't read. Come on, show.
Scotty, you're in Tel Aviv. I thought you were the new MRS foreign correspondent, Terry Aviv.
Terry.
Yeah.
Terry Aviv.
I always thought it'd be rather good fun to have a show, actually, you know, like a phone-in program hosted by several people called Viv and just called it Tel Aviv.
That's brilliant. It's genius. And what about this one? Graham Pack. Has Phil got a matching cravat and budgie smugglers? Oh, for God's sake.
I tell you what,
right, let's bring on our special guest.
If you're very unlucky, I'll give you the answer to that on next week's show.
Oh, dear God. Now, this is someone that I've got to know and like very, very much. Her book.
That's kind of you. I'm very fond of you too.
Sweet of you. Her book, by, as you can see, Lizzie Pickering.
Oh, you don't mean me. That's annoying.
It's not all about you, but nearly always. It's called When Grief Equals Love, which came out last week. I'm very honored to have a whole chapter in it, which is, I wish I hadn't, but I do. And then last week it was launched at the St. Ethelburger's Center for Reconciliation and Peace. I'm not making it up, in the middle of the city. And I was very flattered to do the introductions for Lizzie Pickering. There she is.
Hi.
Hello, Lizzie.
Hopefully you can hear me now.
Absolutely crystal clear and perfectly well. That's marvelous. It would be embarrassing if we couldn't hear you, but we could hear Phil completely from Tel Aviv, thousands of miles away. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you, Russ, and thank you for
you've been on the show before, but give us it's my pleasure. It was my honor, really. Tell us some of the background of the book, why you came to write it.
Oh, well, as you say, I mean, I know both of us wish we weren't in this book, but since we are, it makes some sense maybe of what we've been through. But yes, 23 years ago, my eldest son, Harry, died, age 6.5. And I learned so much about grief. I learned about connecting to grief, and I learned a lot of opposites. And I felt the need to write them down, to process them in some way. So I started writing a diary, and this book is my diary from a month before my son died to 7 years afterwards. And then, as you know, Russ, I'd started working in the grief world. I worked for the Children's Hospice where he died for 12 years. And then I worked with the Good Grief Project. And now I give grief guidance to people. And I work with companies helping people back to work after major bereavements. And all of that, and the book, which also includes 23 interviews with other people, including you, about our various forms of grief. And so what I've learned over the last 23 years is, I suppose, to stay curious about it, to know that I need to sort of keep on top of it still to this day, because it can accumulate and we're not always free of it. I think we live with it, don't we? We live with our grief. And
Lizzie, sorry, can I just ask, when you say keep on top of it, do you mean, in other words, don't suppress feelings? Is that what you refer to?
I do, absolutely. I think we need to keep talking about it, as you demonstrate on Men's Radio. I suppose actually there are a lot of links there, because I've had so many incredible conversations with people over the years about their grief. And I think every time we have one of those conversations, it helps release some of that stress from our bodies, the thoughts from our minds, and keeps us open to the fact we live with it. But I'm a happy person, and I know Russ is too.
No, you are. I can attest to that. You're full of joy and energy.
And I love my life. But I live it with the loss.
I think, yes, you learn to cope. Oh, here we go. Straight away, Julie Voice, who was hallucinating earlier and seeing peacocks and ostriches in Guildford. Julie Voice, where can I get the book from? I think this may help me. Julie sadly lost her husband not that long ago. One of the reasons why she left Houston, Texas, and came back to blooming Guildford. Where can you get the book from?
I'm sorry to hear that, Julie, and thank you for being here today. You can get it pretty much anywhere now. You can get it internationally on Amazon.com. In the UK, try and get it from your local bookshop if you can. They'll always order it in. And it's also available on Audible. But my website is lizziepickering.com. So there are links to book speaking events, and there are links to how to order the book. So I hope that helps. And
Audible, for those who don't know, by the way, is just the audio book service from Amazon.
Yeah, it's I live on audible.com.
Can I just sort of ask as well? Actually, I want to ask both of you this, because I know that both of you have sadly got the qualifications to answer this. Don't you just hate it the way that we sort of live? I think this is born out of people never knowing what to say to someone who has gone through grief or is experiencing grief. But don't you hate it the way that people try and almost justify it when they say that cliched expression, "Well, was it expected?" As if that makes a difference somehow. Do you know?
Russ?
Phil, I've known you many years, so you know this, but I'm always happy to talk about it. People get so uncomfortable, and at the time when you could do with a bit of comfort, a phone call, a text, you don't want someone coming around with a 3-course meal, although people have done that in the past, and they don't get in touch with you for like freaking ages, and then they go, "Oh, I didn't know what to say." I mean, that's just crap. I'm sorry, I didn't know what to say. All you have to say is, "I'm so sorry." The end. That's it. It's no more complicated than that.
Or actually, do you know what? Just be honest and say, "I don't actually know what to say to you."
Fine. I've done that. If it's been horrendous circumstances, I phone up or I text or whatever it is, and I go, "Look, words are useless. I have no idea what the hell to say to you. I'm here. If I can reach out, if I can help you, I will." That's all you want.
Do you remember when Jacinda Ardern, the sadly ex now New Zealand Prime Minister, when there was the massacre in New Zealand, she said, We cannot know your grief, but we will walk beside you every step of the way. And she didn't try, and it went viral. And I mean, it's so rare for something good that a political leader says to go viral.
It seems to be a Lizzie, I would say it's a non sequitur almost.
Exactly.
Luke
And
Newman's...
the reason that was so good was because she wasn't placating anyone. She wasn't trying to make them better. It was said without ego. And it was about being alongside. And the greatest thing we can do is listen to people who are bereaved. And, we're in my grief guidance work. It's not always bereavement over a death. It's the same set of rules, actually, for people who've gone through a major divorce or workplace change or a diagnosis where they're going through anticipatory grief or living grief for an unknown future. Yes.
And that's actually so true, because if circumstances change beyond our control, that can still cause grief. I know that, look, I'm fortunate enough not to have lost anyone too close to me. I've spoken in the past about pet grief. I've spoken about the loss of grandparents. But, as things stand, touch wood, and please, it's for many years this is the case. Immediately, I haven't lost anyone. However, I think that when circumstances change beyond our control, it is very bizarre how we do sort of enter this sort of unexpected world of grief. Because I know, for example, with me, when I found myself sort of grieving for, I know it sounds daft, but the way that our country has changed. So, I'm speaking to you from Israel at the moment, but I remember very fondly growing up throughout the 90s and pretty much loving life. And then for whatever reason, as soon as the noughties came along, it sort of started to change beyond recognition. And so as a result of it, for me, I find myself almost like grieving for that period of my life, which just sounds so trivial, but it is a real emotion. It's a real feeling.
Not trivial. But Phil, if you're feeling it, it's not trivial. This is one of the things we've worked so hard on MRS to try and get across. Just because you're feeling it does not mean it's trivial.
No, maybe it doesn't make it trivial, but do you know what I mean? It sounds it, doesn't it?
That would be a disaster. But to you, there's so many comments coming in. Let's just deal with this. And Lizzie, please stay for the whole show. You're very welcome, unless you've got to dash off. Because, by the way, I had not just Lizzie, who I said, please come on the show anytime you like. I then had two different PR companies. And I was just laughing because I said, no, we don't know. We've got this client. I go, oh, would that be the client where I have a chapter in her book and I helped launch it last week? Like dead air from the other on the phone. Fat Scotty, who's in Wolverhampton, says this: Lizzie, were you able to prepare for the loss of your son and the grief you thought you were going to experience? Thank you for being so positive and for sharing your and your son's story.
Oh, that's a great question, Scotty. Yeah. Thank you. I think in some ways, but and I get asked this question a bit. I do a lot of work with the Good Grief Project, and Jane, the founder of the Good Grief Project, who run retreats for bereaved parents and siblings, her son died in a motor accident, and it was very sudden. My son had a diagnosis, and that was the first moment of my grief. And so I suppose I did have the privilege of a warning, but that warning was so painful. So I think it's just a different form of preparation and grief. And I know Russ went through this too, that when you're living with a diagnosis, it's like a double-edged sword, really, as many of you here today will know. That you have a sort of enhanced sense of wanting to make the most of every single day, every second of every day. And that is a gift in some ways, but it's also a living hell because it is anticipatory or living grief. So you're living with the grief from that moment of diagnosis, especially if you're given no hope, as we were. And it's very hard because every moment you're trying to create and curate and put in the memory bank is also deeply painful because you might not do these things again. And so I think in answer to your question, I think I did have some time to prepare, but in all honesty, I don't think any of us can really prepare.
It's absolute. I couldn't agree with you more. I had plenty of time to prepare, was prepared. It was inevitable. It was a mercy at the end, but still hits you like a tsunami. And that's all there is to it. Right. Plenty
I
more
think
stuff
it's
coming in.
testimony to what an extraordinary human being you are, Lizzie. The fact that you describe having a bit of warning as a privilege. I think it's amazing that you describe it as that, because I don't see it as a privilege. I think that someone who, I mean, not that anyone deserves it, but the fact that someone who clearly doesn't deserve to go through what you've gone through describes it as a warning is just mind-blowing to me. It really is.
Well, I've often thought, Phil, and I think Lizzie and I have talked about this on the phone. I think we have. Is it better not to know or for it to come out of the blue? I think it's better to know. I couldn't think of personally anything worse than you're having a nice day and someone's just been, I don't know, hit by a bus, let's just say, or just dropped dead of an aneurysm. It's deeply shocking. I mean, you've got not just you probably prepared dinner for them or something. I'm not being gruesome, but it's true. I'd rather have had the time to somehow gather whatever wits I have and prepare for it. Luke Newman says this: I lost my mum when she was 54, no age, sister at 44, absolutely no age, both to cancer. I channel that grief by supporting others through For Men to Talk and my humanitarian trips to Kenya, returning for the 8th time tomorrow. Luke, you are a force of nature. Julie Voice comes up with something very good about, people say, I didn't know what to say. That's why I didn't contact you. Believe me, I've had that. I bet you've had that as well, Lizzie. Julie Voice says, just hi, how are you? That's it. That'll do. Not too tricky. Would you like to read this, Mr. Tel Aviv?
I would do my best. You have to excuse me. The sun's quite garish. Let me just hello all. Hello, support needed. I'm having a battle with BP. Oh, anyway. Yeah, BP, over wrecking my parents' house. Their house neighbours.
Let me read it.
Oh, I see. Okay, no. Paul, hang on. Sorry, we've got to be very careful with this.
I don't think we can read this out.
Yeah, no. Hang on a second. We've got to be very careful with that because I'm so sorry. Because honestly, but that's your word. We don't know it's BP's fault. I'm really sorry for anything you're going through, but honestly, we have to take that at surface value. I'm really sorry.
All right, Paul Claridge says this, and I'll only read it, Phil, because I know the sunshine.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
For London, we haven't
got it's such a hard knock life.
It's a hard knock life, Phil Dave. Grief is such a personal experience, which we all feel in different ways, absolutely. But there are similarities which we will all sadly experience at some point in our lives. I've suffered grief for most of my adult life due to a number of deaths and serious illness. Well, Paul nearly died. He had cancer very, very badly. I've got coping methods, humor being one of them. That's true. I'll attest to that. But the one death I've never really got over, oh God, is that of my youngest son, who was stillborn at full term. Oh, Paul, 19 years ago. The important thing is to talk to someone you can trust. And that's as far as we've got. Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's
I'm
rough.
so sorry.
That's rough, Paul Claridge.
And so much of that is about the expectation of the life you were going to have with that son, isn't it? It's so, grief is so multifaceted, isn't it? And I think, the big thing, there were so many opposites that I've learned that it's the reason I've developed my own form of grief guidance is because I couldn't quite find, I've had therapy, I've had hypnotherapy to help me sleep. I've tried lots of different things and many of them were very, very good. But I think we have to find a recipe of what suits us. And it is ongoing, isn't it? And because of the accumulation of other life events happening, I'm a massive fan of Dr. Edith Egger's work, the psychologist who's an Auschwitz survivor, because her 2 books, The Choice and The Gift, are really incredible. She's 95. She's a social media influencer. She has a great Instagram account. And she says that to this day, she still has to keep on top of her grief. She works with it. She's a trauma expert. She works all over the world in trauma. But she never quite leaves her own grief behind. And I think to acknowledge that, as Paul has done very bravely today, is so important, but it does make people uncomfortable. And that's what, it's why I've written this book and why it includes a community of other people talking about their many forms of grief. And in the book, there's Russ talking about his wife Sally dying. There's a refugee friend from Sudan, Ishmael, talking about leaving his home and his community. There's a friend who talks about her brother dying by suicide. There's another friend whose mother died when she was very young. There are 23 stories of grief in there. And the first two people that I interviewed were actually my adult children, who were 2 and 5 when I started writing the diaries. And I decided to interview them aged 24 and 27 because, or that's the age they are now, because I wanted to hear from them as adults about how this grief had impacted their lives. And actually those interviews are so beautiful. I've never felt more proud of them because we sat down with a recording device and we spoke for an hour specifically about their grief, and I am so proud of them as human beings.
Did you learn anything that you hadn't previously discussed, Lizzie?
Yeah, I did actually, and actually I just see my ring is showing here. This ring is oh, hang on, where am I? There,
that's it.
Is a cochlear. It's my son designed that ring. And it's the inner ear, the cochlear. And my son's a music producer. And he gave me the ring when at the launch last week, just before Russ and I were due to speak. He put it on my finger just as I was standing on the stage. And the significance is that in the book, my son Cam talks about music representing grief for him because of the sound waves, the undulating sound waves. And because he's a music producer, he's on a screen looking at sound waves all day long, and it represents his grief. So how he is there epitomizing that he's living with grief every day. He's witnessing his representation of grief. And he designed this ring as the logo for his company because it represents sound and grief for him. And he lives with it very happily every day. It's part of his life, his grief for his brother. But to me, that's so positive. My daughter works in film, and so often recently she sent me photos of her with the book, with other crew on the film, because she's discovering they've been through grief at young ages, and she's talking to them about it. And this is the significance, isn't it? I think if we, if writing this book with my collaborators like Russ, who have shared their stories, we're building a community. I did 3 events in the last 2 days, very, very different events. And at every single event, we created a safe space where people could talk and people shared their stories. And to me, that's what it's all about. And it's what Men's Radio is about too, isn't it?
Thank you. I'm going to go through some of the comments of Phil's got blazing sunshine in Tel Aviv, so he can't see his screen. But I'm not jealous. Lizzie, I'm not a jealous person. I'm not like
that. And that's the most important thing.
That's not me. That's not my personality. That's not who I am. I'm not a jealous person. I don't think. I don't judge other people. I wouldn't do that. It's not for me. Thank you, Lizzie, for your honesty. I feel very humbled, says
Thank you.
Ramsey, I'm sorry to block us out, but this is an important one. My father died suddenly of a heart attack when I was 15. I'm so sorry, Ramsey. Yuck. Didn't get the chance to tell him how much we loved him. No. My mother passed away from a brain tumor. Oh, my God. We knew she had limited time. We were able to say our goodbyes. 2 of our sisters flew over from San Francisco, had some time with her, and she slipped away a few hours later at the Royal Marsden in Sutton. Magnificent hospital, by the way. Comparing grief, I was more upset and still am at my father's passing because it was incomplete, if you like. By the way, I love Jacinda Ardern's comment, so apt, and I'm going to guess meaningful was the last bit. Yeah, there you go. See, everyone's got a story. There was a very, very good question up here, and I've got to do and try and find
Graham Pack asked a fascinating question, actually.
That was it.
And I personally, I struggle to sort of think along these lines because to me it's kind of like sort of saying, well, who would you prefer to die? Do you know what I mean? But that's not what he means. He's saying
choice, isn't it?
Is grief worse when a child has died as opposed to when a parent dies? So, I mean, I know that's not what he's talking about. He's not saying sort of who would you prefer, but it does kind of sort of inadvertently feel like that, doesn't it?
Could I talk about both those questions?
Of course, please do.
So Ramsey, I think, to me, your slightly unresolved grief over your father because of that very challenging situation where you weren't able to say goodbye. And sadly, over the last 3 years, I've been giving grief guidance to people so much over that because of COVID and the fact that so many people weren't able to be with their relatives. And I think what we can't do is change what's already happened. That was a situation out of your control. But what we can do is live our lives and honor the people that we've lost. And I would, if I was giving you grief guidance, I'd really find ways to honor your father. And I'm sure you do anyway with the way you live your life to this day. And I think so often people have various forms of unresolved grief. And the only thing we can do is sort of channel them and live them fully now and pay respect and find a way. I get people journaling and writing. And often it's about putting those difficult thoughts, the negativity, into the back of a book and putting the things you want to bring forward to connect with into the front of the book. And it doesn't need to be a lot of writing if you're not somebody that likes writing, but sometimes it's just placing those thoughts somewhere can be very, very helpful. And the second question, which is the potentially worst grief, I truly believe that grief is not competitive. I think for everybody, it's whatever your worst grief is. For me, it is probably the death of my child, but my mother, I'm an only child, and my mother died the year before my son died at a time I so needed her. And my father died 10 years later. And my two children are my blood relations, and I'm so lucky to have them. But everybody, said to me, you've been through the worst thing, the death of a child. It's my worst thing. But to somebody else, as we touched on earlier, it could be their cat, it could be their grandparent. Their grandparent could have been their main human in their lives because they were.
Yeah.
And the cat could have been the mainstay in a very, very difficult and turbulent time. And the cat could have been the one living thing in their lives who really was their rock, or their dog. In Russ's
when I had to have my dog put down many years ago, I have never cried so much in my life, and I'm not embarrassed to say it. Yeah. And my dog, who everybody knows is the center of the universe, Ebony, the mini Schnauzer, she's 14, and so I've always thought of the back of my mind. Anyway, Fat Scotty says this: Lizzie, I often talk to my nan, who we lost in 2008. I often tell her that while we struggle losing her, she shouldn't be upset for us. What would? Oh God, I'm having trouble reading this, but I'm going to go ahead. Boy, oh boy. Don't feel you're obliged, Lizzie, by the way. I can't read this out. What would you say to your son in the same way I've done? That has pushed me to the limit, by the way, Scott. As a professional broadcaster, that has put me right on the edge, and I'm rarely there. That is a tough read.
I think that's so beautiful. And, grief changes, doesn't it? On another day, I might have not been able to answer this, but today I can. And that's how grief is, isn't it? Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. And on some of the events I do for the book, I read an excerpt from the book and I cry when I'm reading it. And on other days I don't. But today I can answer that question. And I would say thank you, Harry. I really would. Harry was the most energized and cup half full person. He loved life, and he taught me so much about living life to the full and living in the present, because that's what he did. He was so wise beyond his years, and he loved, he had so many medical interventions. At some stages, we'd have 20 medical professionals working with him, and the hospital appointments were interminable and horrendous, but he still loved his life. And that's what I took from Harry, and that's what I would say thank you for. And that's why I felt the need to publish the book, was to represent Harry, because I think there's a community of us who learn so much from him, and he is with us every single day. He's here. That's him at a young age.
Bless him.
And he was just full of joy. That is a typical Harry face to me, and that for anyone living in early grief, and I met a lot of people last night at an event I did, and particularly some bereaved parents whose son died only a few weeks ago, and they were so courageous to come along to that event
Blimey.
and share their story. And for anyone in early grief, I know people are so traumatized by the images that they still see. And someone actually said to me when Harry first died, he will come back to you. And I nearly punched him.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because it was such an alien concept to me at the time.
I tell you what, Lizzie, my favourite, my favourite was going into when my wife was very ill, obviously in and out the chemist, and this stupid woman behind the counter, she came out very upset. She went in to get some of the medication and said, "Don't worry, Jesus wants you as a sunbeam." I ran into that woman about a week later. I don't think she'll forget our confrontation.
No.
Right, let's crack through some of the... Chantal, I can see you, by the way. Elizabeth Green from Manhattan, New York says, I think it's important, so important, how we parent, please. How we parent, full stop, should be. Please love and hold and tell your kids how great they are. I do, yeah, well, there you go. I do that with Phil. Always treasure what you have now. Still do that with Phil.
So true.
Paul Claridge, Russ, Phil. Yesterday, I was re-listening to the interview we did back on MRS in 2019. You and I, Russ, both mentioned people. Oh, God, yeah, it gets me going. Apparently not knowing what to say to us and expecting our forgiveness when they tried to reconnect with us after deserting us at the time of need most. My class of that, Lizzie Pickering, was somebody about 6 years later sent me a letter. So sorry. There was a misunderstanding. And I just wrote back, what part of someone's dead are you misunderstanding? Was it tricky? Was there a grey area? I don't think so. Bye-bye. And they came over to me and like, ugh.
There's a wonderful interview in the book with Francie Clarkson, and she talks about her father dying when she was young, but also her sister dying, and her sister's group of friends not being there for her sister when she was dying of a brain tumor, and how hard Francie struggled with that. But Francie turned it into something positive because it showed her, she learned from it that you must always step up for people. And so when she met a stranger at a conference, and she's written this in the book some years later, and the stranger happened to share with her that she'd been through a recent bereavement, Francie said, she gave her phone number and she said to her, if ever you want to talk, give me a ring. And the stranger did. And it was really extraordinary. And Francie's written about this, how it was only because she'd been let down so badly by other people that she turned it into the positive of always being there for others. And that's all we
expect good stuff. Don't, I think, if any, well, they get a million things because it's Lizzie Pickering and she's an extraordinary human being. But one of the things to derived from our conversation, and Chantal will be with you in just a tickety-boo, is this: don't expect other people to be there for you. They might, and if they are, it's a terrific bonus. But I promise you this, when the shit hits the fan, you will know within about 3 minutes who your real friends are and who are just hanging around. And the ones who are just hanging around who aren't there for you, dump them. I never spoke to them again. Didn't bother. He came up, hi, it's this particular person. Hi, Russ. I just walked straight past. Goodbye. I just walked out the room. Screw it.
There are the unexpected ones who show up.
Totally unexpected.
They're often people you may not know very well, but because they've been through something themselves, they show up massively, and they're the bonus.
Incredible. People, the most unlikely people did the most incredible things. Julie Voice, thank you, Lizzie. I shall look forward to reading your book. I just want to say that you are so serene. I know she's here and she can hear me, but she's a very, very special person. And this from Fat Scotty, Russ, Lizzie, Phil. Thank you for answering and asking.
Well, I think that he has addressed you two on purpose, so don't worry.
Don't be silly. I'm adding you.
No. But he's
your holiday. You've taken the time on your holiday to be here.
Russ, if you read the comment, I've read this comment. Read the comment. You'll know why he's addressing you two.
If it's any consolation, I've already cracked this end. Yeah. Harry looks bloody adorable. Absolutely so. And I'll just quickly do this, then we're going to come on to our special Friday guest. And you're welcome to stay, but knowing you probably got 28 PR companies phoning people like me. Big shout out
I'm actually on a day off today, Russ, so I probably should spend it with my family, shouldn't I? In honor of
just ruin that for you. Lizzie, if it's any consolation, I'm on a day off as well. It's fine.
Yeah. Big shout out for SANS. That's the stillbirth and neonatal death charity. They're amazing when we needed them, especially for me. A grieving father, as the NHS at the time, cared a lot for my ex-wife, but not for me. Oh, God, well, that's a whole other thing, Paul, we're going to get into. Lizzie, would you like to stay?
I can't stay, but could we just have a quick chat about the Hay Festival and Celebration Day?
Go ahead. I'm going to bring Chantal on. Don't go away. I'm going to bring Chantal on because the Winnebago is just pulling out of West London. Hair and makeup is perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, the screen queen herself, former CEO of BAFTA Los Angeles, my charm, your charm, Chantal Rickards.
Hello, guys. I'm happy to be joining this slightly sad but very positive conversation.
Chantal, we actually met in LA over a film I made called Let Me Go many years ago. That's amazing.
Oh, God.
Good to see you.
Oh, well, we're gone. Bye, you
For
two.
heaven's sake, Chantal, is there nobody you don't know? It's ridiculous. Just whenever you go anywhere, you bump into somebody.
I'm very old. I've just met a lot of people.
No, you're not very old.
No, I meant you haven't bumped into a lot of people. Hello.
Oh, sorry. Phil Fat Scott says, Phil, it must be warm in Tel Aviv as your sans cravat. It's not wearing
not sans cravat. I am wearing a scarf.
Degrees Celsius. Yeah, only Phil. Right. Now then, you want to talk about the Hay Festival, and then we must concentrate on Chantal, who does all her homework.
Absolutely, and then I will need to go. So Hay Festival next Sunday on the 28th of May. It's relevant to our conversation. There's a new movement in the UK to have a celebration day, to celebrate people who have died and to celebrate their lives. And it's in the second year of its founding. You can find it on celebrationday.com. And a group of us are speaking at Hay next week on Sunday at 8:30 p.m. And tickets are available through the Hay Festival website. And the idea is a bit like the Mexican Day of the Dead, where they have that absolute gift of every year having a day where you play your loved one's favorite music, you make their food, you talk about them, and you have a party. And here in the UK, certainly, we don't have anything like that. So there's a movement of a group of people, Richard E. Grant's involved, Prue Leith's involved, all sorts of people are involved who have gone through bereavement, to have a day of celebration where we can choose how we spend that day. So do look it up. It's celebrationday.com. If anyone can come to Hay Festival, I'll be interviewing Osman Yusfada, who's an incredible creator. He clothes Lady Gaga and all sorts of people. He's written an amazing book called The Go-Between. Claire McIntosh, who's the crime writer who sells her books all over the world. And James McConnell, who's an incredible pianist and creator. And we're going to be having a conversation about why we should celebrate the people we've lost and loved. So do come along if you can. It's so lovely to see you all.
You're an amazing human being. This will not be the last time you're on the Daily Show on Men's Radio. Bless you. Good luck with the book.
So much.
Here it is one more time. When Grief Equals Love. You can get it on Amazon or nag your bookshop, because we want to keep our bookshop. Lizzie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I just say, Lizzie, and also Lizzie, I'm really pleased that it's called Heyday, because it's a hell of a lot easier than saying Dia de los Muertos. But anyway.
Senor Chantal Rickards.
Oh wow!
Right. Okay, I'm sorry. I know we've cut into your time.
Listen, don't worry. I'm just there to fill some space if you need me.
Don't be ridiculous.
I know the feeling.
No, you're just there to be Phil. That's the
yeah,
best name in media at the moment. Right. What have you? Come on. How do you think that's going to work out? By the way, TV guru.
Oh well, there's so much good stuff on at the moment. Honestly, I've got.
You avoided my question. Very good. I admire you for that. I admire you for that.
Yeah, I can sidestep a question or two.
It's like a politician in disguise.
She is so professional. Oh, I knew this was coming. Is Russ Phil's Holly?
Oh, well, then you're still speaking.
No, because we actually like each other. We're good friends in real life.
Do you know? I was going to say, I actually think that I noticed the other day, because if people don't know what you're referring to, this is the alleged fallout between Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby from this morning. And I don't mean this morning as in today. I mean like literally the program this morning. And it was really interesting because they were reunited Monday just gone for the first time since all of this came to the surface. And I think it was really, really stupid of them to pretend it wasn't happening, because they had a pay-per-view, and on a couple of the front pages they featured, they totally ignored it. They spoke about the stories that meant something, and they just pretended it didn't exist. And I think that was the worst thing, because all that has done is confirmed it must be true.
Absolutely. And his brother just got banged up for 12 years.
Yep.
As of this morning, 12 years. He's got quite right.
I have to say, audiences are very perceptive, because I was a producer on This Morning a million years ago, and I worked with different couples and different iterations of on-screen presenters, and you can absolutely tell when people aren't getting on. I think it just comes across on the screen. People aren't fooled by it, and they can see straight through it when that closeness has disappeared.
And
did you ever work with Colleen, Nolan, and Twiggy? I thought that was a very strange pairing.
No, I didn't.
I thought you should be working.
Very, very strange pairing.
It used to it made me die. I saw something on Twitter yesterday, Chantal, that Phil wouldn't have seen it. I doubt. What was the woman who used to do the cleaning?
What? The two domestic cleaners on the Channel 4 show.
Kim Woodburn.
Kim Woodburn. Holy moly. Kim Woodburn. If I've got the right one. One's slightly larger.
Yeah, you have. She laid into them. Yeah.
She caught. I'm not going to use the language. It was on another radio station. It was like, what the heck? What a beef. And as you know, with television, feuds go on for decades. And a certain broadcaster, a certain Antipodean broadcaster, is having a field day because it's payback time. That's all I'm going to say. And that's why. So that's why this is being stirred up to boiling point, to absolute boiling point. Wow. Can't talk about it in public because they'll sue, but it's all true. Anyway, what's come across your purview?
Well, I tell you something I've really enjoyed, because it told me a lot about a piece of history I knew nothing about. And there is an incredibly good 4-part documentary series on Sky and Now, which I think you've got, Russ. Sky, for those that haven't got Now. 4-part documentary series made by the Raw production company, Raw Productions, who made The Tinder Swindler. So it's a story that unfolds in a really tense way, but it's actually about the story of the killing of the Swedish Prime Minister in 1986 called Olof Palme. Now, clearly I was around in 86, and clearly I knew
you weren't. You weren't.
Sadly, I was.
I was around for half of 86.
You can shut up, Phil, because you're really not only are you on holiday, but you're 12 years old, so shut up.
Born in 86.
I know, it's unbelievable. But he's so depressing.
That is really depressing.
86. I wear clothes from 86.
You do know it's just too easy to wind Russ up. It's just I have to say these things. I'm really sorry.
When you feel very, very mortal, I feel more mortal every bloody day. It's just like you're getting invited to more and more commemorative services, and I'm going, oh, jeez, come on.
Indeed. Well, I was invited to my first 70th birthday party this weekend, so that made me feel terribly old. But anyway, back to this documentary.
Me? Pardon me?
The first one.
It's the first one.
Nothing.
I tell you why it's worth watching. Do you remember the Swedish crime writer called Stig Larsson, who wrote the man who played with fire, and The Girl in the Hornet's Nest, and The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo?
The TV producer who grew her fringe out. That was one of his best.
Probably. That'll be the next one. Rather sadly, he's no longer with us. But in 1986, he was an illustrator on a newspaper in Sweden, and was asked to do a drawing of the crime scene of Olof Palme. He later went on to become a famous novelist, made a ton of money, and then sadly died relatively young. But he completely went down the rabbit hole, really because of this one drawing that he was asked to do for the newspaper, to try and find out who had murdered Olof Palme. They interviewed, I think at the time, something like 10,000 people were interviewed about the crime and trying to solve it. And nobody really solved it. There were lots of different theories, whether it was the far right in Sweden, whether it was the Russians, whether it was the Americans, whether it was the South Africans. Everybody was mentioned who could possibly have been mentioned as a bad actor. But Stig Larsson left behind boxes and boxes and boxes of research. And then along comes a former diplomat who basically is the host of this 4-part documentary and goes back through every single piece of research and everything that's happened subsequently, but using the Stig Larsson's boxes of information as his guide, if you like, to try and uncover who done it. But it tells you so much about the politics at the time. It tells you about, I know very little about Sweden, but you suddenly begin to understand how important a country it was, because it wouldn't side with the West and it wouldn't side with the East. And so Olof Palme, who was a social democrat, was absolutely his own man, playing his own game and trying not to get consumed, if you like, by these monolithic countries to the right and to the left. It's absolutely fascinating. It's a great historical documentary, as well as being a sort of a thriller and trying to uncover who done it.
And what is you see, every week, you think I don't. I write these down, and you have never let me down, or our chums and audience all over the world. So what is this called?
Right, this is called The Man Who Played with Fire.
Oh, it is?
It's actually called Stig Larsson, The Man Who Played with Fire, which is...
and was he in a reasonably priced car? I love that joke. Man Who Played... Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it doesn't mention Olof Palme in the title, but it's terrific. I think it'll win awards. It's that good. It's beautifully edited, and the stories are fascinating. A lot of time is spent in South Africa. I won't spoil it by telling you why, but it's and the archive is tremendous. Really, really good. There's a little tiny.
If it's the same people who did the Tinder, you recommended to me the Tinder Swindler, which made me into a fury for weeks afterwards. I thought it was a genius documentary. Absolutely sensational piece of television. If that's made by the same company.
How appropriate that I happen to be in the homeland of the Tinder swindler. So there you go.
Oh, indeed, you
are you having dinner with him later? Are you having dinner with him tonight?
Yeah, I mean, we met over an app a couple of days ago. He said,
"Yeah, oh,
just don't take your wallet with you."
Phil, I'd love to invest. I'd love to invest in a mental health and well-being radio station. Now, all I need you, Phil, if you could just get Russ and yourself and Howard and Penny and Chantal to just send me a little bit of seed money. I know, what a piece of work he was.
That's what we need.
And praise coming in, of course. Love. What does it say? Love your enunciation on Stig, Chantal. It's because he's from Wolverhampton. You would call him the Stig. Right. There we go. Right. Okay. So, that sounds like a winner. I'm going to watch that. That sounds great. Okay.
Chantal, did you tell us about something called 10-pound pom?
Well, I think we discussed it coming up. I have now watched the first episode. We can chat about it now if you'd like to.
Well, no, I was just going to say, because I downloaded it for the plane and I can't remember where I heard about it, and I just thought it was from you. I watched the first episode. I haven't watched anything else yet. I thought it was interesting, but I think maybe it's like one of those, a bit like Downton Abbey, where the first episode's really slow and you have to get into it a bit, maybe.
Okay, well, let me tell you a bit about it. £10 Poms has just started on the BBC. It is a 6-part series, I think, by Danny Brocklehurst, who wrote Brassic and Shameless. Very, very good writer. The £10 Poms, for those that don't know, Australia desperately needed a workforce after the Second World War and started the £10 Poms scheme. And everybody could travel to Australia, be given basic housing and a job, and they just had to pay the initial £10 and everything else was covered for their trip. That went on. 1 million Brits went over during this time.
Including
that they
my
allotted.
auntie, my aunt, and my dad's sister went. Yeah, my aunt's sister went.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and John O'Coleman, an old friend of mine, a radio broadcaster, his parents went over as £10 Poms.
I didn't know that.
That's
wow,
why
the
he
late
was
great
there.
John Coleman.
What a lovely man, much missed.
From he was a Londoner from East London, and his parents went out as £10 Poms.
Wow,
And
okay, I didn't know that.
It worked, but there were lots of difficulties because there was a lot of racism towards the Brits when they got there.
And it's
which,
true.
Brits weren't really used to that, to be honest. The housing wasn't the housing that they all expected. The jobs weren't quite the jobs that they all expected. Yeah. So anyway, I'm surprised nobody's done a drama before about £10 Poms. This one starts quite well. There's a bit of a mystery going on. There's a nice family of father, mother, and 2 children, but the father has just come back from the Second World War and clearly has got PTSD. He's a drinker and a gambler, and they decide to leave Stockport and head to Australia. There's a girl who leaves behind her fiancé, and in the scene where she leaves the apartment to go to the dock, you're not quite sure whether he's dead or alive on their bed. And she arrives in Australia. You think, hang on a second, there's a story to be had out of this. So it's a bit of a sort of call the midwife-ish. There's a bit of a thriller to it. There's quite a lot of mystery, but there's also a lot of history. So I think it's going to be good. The first episode, you're right, Phil, it's a little bit ponderous, but then gathers speed towards the end. But the reviews for future episodes are better, and I think it gets more pacey. So I think it's going to be one to stick with.
No, I do think I need to give it a chance, because I think that the truth is that normally dramas that are so good after the first episode have peaked too early.
Yeah, that's a good word of looking at
it.
it.
I couldn't agree with you more. We spoke about Citadel, and Amazon, most expensive thing that Amazon have ever made, $350 million to make this pile of poo. Anyway, our one of our supporters, often on the show with comments, Sen Monroe, is in episode 3, and he's terrific. It was absolutely great. It's a big scene, none of which I was expecting. And I thought the first 3 episodes were good. I caught up with episode 4. It was pants.
Oh no!
In fact, I am insulting the world of underwear to call episode 4 pants. It was awful.
Well, you know what the problem is, don't you?
What?
That was Sen. This is now.
Oh dear.
No, it was interesting. The first 3 episodes rocked along. And I thought, it's complete crap, but it's wonderful to watch. It's engaging. It's exciting. And then episode 4, I mean, what did they do? Did they go out to lunch and let the office cleaner write it or something? I mean, God.
Oh dear, I'm really sorry to hear that.
How's the writing?
But what did you really think of it, though?
Oh, I loved it. It was really good. Sorry, I thought that came across. Now, Chantal, big news in the world of showbiz, of which, of course, you are the epicenter. The writer's strike. And before everyone goes, this sounds boring, the writer's strike means that the film industry and all the streaming industry is crippled. Can't move forward. Can't move forward at all. And am I right in thinking this is the first time that the SAG, which is the Screen Actors Guild of America, hugely powerful, and the Directors Guild, for the first time ever, they are going to possibly come out in support of the writer's strike. That means no one can add a word or write a script or anything. It stops like you've turned off a tap. Is that right?
Well, it's a very tricky situation. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think what they're trying to do this time is get as many people to support the DGA, the Directors Guild, and the Writers Guild, the WGA, to support them as possible. They're getting lots of talent to, go on social media to drum up support. I think it's going to be really interesting. In fact, I was talking to a producer a couple of days ago, and he said, even with the stuff that's in production, they are having problems, because if somebody wants to change one word in something that's already being shot, because they're thinking, well, we've got lots of scripts, we'll just carry on working. We're not allowed to write any new scripts. But even if you change a word whilst the filming's happening and somebody says, can I say yes instead of no, a writer has to do that. A writer has to approve it, and they can't be on the set to do it. So that's actually potentially slowing down a lot of stuff that is already being filmed, because if they've got to change a scene, they can't. So it's going to get really nasty, I think, and we'll see what happens. But these are they're big, topics that they have to tackle, and they have to sort them out.
But on the plus side, it will give us loads of time to catch up on all those programs we've been meaning to watch over the years, whilst there's no new stuff in production.
But in case any film producer or director is out there, don't forget there are very good British writers who I'm sure will write for you.
Cheeky plug there. Good work. Actually, do you know what? Speaking of plug, the plug has been pulled, of course, after 20 years of Saturday Night Takeaway.
Oh. Well,
that's gone.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I didn't even realise it was still going.
Neither did I. It's not I think I've ever watched. But that's Anton Deck. Is that Anton Deck? Am I going mad? And that's 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm surprised it's 20 years. I thought it was way less than that. I thought it was about 15.
I thought it was about 4 years or 5. In my head, it's 4 or 5 years. 20 years.
That's amazing.
God damn, that's been doing it.
Well.
£66 million later, you've got to feel sorry for them.
Do you know what? I will say this. I've said this about Anton Deck before, and I will say it again. They're really, really lovely guys. And what you see, they're the same guys. When the camera stops, they're the same guys. They're really, really nice. They're charming. They're friendly. And I think they're super talented. I think that they've got whatever it is they've got, it works in spades. It's terrific.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Well, that's on-screen chemistry and on-screen charisma. And,
and you can tell they're really great friends. They're really great friends. Graham Pack, interesting question, as opposed to your usual jokes, is for Chantal, of course. How does the strike affect the late night shows in America like Kimmel? I suppose you had Jimmy Fallon and the other one whose name I didn't mention. Yeah.
Stone dead.
Oh my gosh.
Those were the first shows.
Wow.
Yeah, those were the first shows that couldn't go ahead because there are no writers who write the opening monologues. So that's...
Oh my goodness me.
What happens if... I just...
Here's a shock. Why don't they write their own monologues?
Because they're not funny. Because they're really not funny. The Kimmel and Fallon are just in themselves not funny at all. And the other one definitely isn't funny. So what happens if... I don't know. Jimmy Kimmel says, well, I'll write my own monologue. Can he do that? He can't do that.
No. Because they're all coming out in support of the writers. So Stephen Colbert stood up before the strike vote was taken, and Colbert is one of the biggest, in fact, probably the biggest late night show host in America.
Wrong.
He was supporting them. Wrong. He actually is also a member of the Writers Guild of America, or maybe he's a member of the PGA. But he basically said, I'm supporting the guys. So everybody's supporting everybody.
I have a love-hate relationship with Stephen Colbert. Do you know who the biggest late night star is? With the biggest ratings?
Who?
Greg Gutfield, who I watch every night.
Oh, really? Yes, indeed
Greg
you
Gutfield. Greg Gutfeld, who was a magazine editor. And he has a show which costs probably about £4.50 to project. There's no production value in it.
About $5.
About $5 and change. You probably get a sandwich and a Diet Coke. And I got to
now, speaking of sandwich and a Diet Coke, I need to go off and have a very late lunch before everything shuts down for Friday night. Chantal, have you got one very quick fire suggestion?
Yes, off you go.
Yes. Something called, it's on Disney Plus, so you will have to find it, Russ, elsewhere. It's called A Small Light. It's the story, it's not the story of Anne Frank. It's the story of the woman who concealed the Frank family, who had been secret to Otto Frank. It's really good. It's a 6-part series. It's on Disney Plus. It's beautifully played, and it's taking the Anne Frank story from a completely different perspective. But it's full of sort of drama and pace, and I think it's really well done, beautifully played.
And it's, sorry, Chantal, it's called what? Sorry,
it's called A Small Light.
A Small Light. That's on Disney Plus. Chantal, you're a living legend. Thank you so much.
You are a living legend and a font of all knowledge. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
You can join us.
Happy
Phil,
holiday.
Thank you. See you next week.
Bye, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.
Go on.